Welcome to Sartor TV. I'm Vanessa Tyler. Money. Many of us want to make more, and equally important, save more. Is that even possible? Our guest today is the home economist, Brett Graff. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure for me.
Talk about how you got to where you are now.
Okay, well, thanks for asking. I started my career as an economist for the United States government. I used to measure inflation, and that is actually a lot more fun than it sounds. But one of the things I noticed in talking to the media was that they were having more fun than I was. I thought. So when I moved to Florida eventually, I decided I was going to be a reporter. I was absolutely right. We have so much fun as reporters, we really do. And I had my first child and I started freelancing. And I was writing for Glamour, I had left a job at Reuters where I was a correspondent, but then now I was freelancing for all the women's magazines, the baby magazines. And then one time an editor of mine called me from a television station and he said, Brett, look, the economists are telling us that inflation is low. My wife goes to the supermarket and prices are high. How can you explain this? So I went out and I said, oh, it's very easy because I know government data and I know the supermarket, and I was able to explain, how government data or how economic data relates to real people, and I became the home economist. And that was been about 12 years ago. And ever since then, I've started, I've been hired by news organizations, by financial organizations, by schools to come in and explain how economic forces affect real people. As you know, I have a column in the Miami Herald. I'm a regular on Washington, D.C.'s ABC stations, and I write for newspaper. My column is syndicated, so after it runs in the Miami Herald, it's on the Tribune Wire, and then it goes into about 400 media outlets nationwide, and I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of the work that we do.
That is terrific, and I tell you, especially now, people really need that kind of information that you provide, which brings us to the book.
Yeah.
Why did you write the book, Not Buying?
I wrote the book because a friend and I, we were at a holiday party, and we were just talking about all the money we spend on our kids. And she's a pediatrician. She actually wrote the foreword for the book. And she said, but this is before the book was even an idea, and she said, God, do you think we're messing up our kids by spending all this money on them? And I said, I don't know. So I looked into every facet of our spending. And I found research from the National Institute of Health, from the American Academy of Pediatrics, from Harvard, from Cornell, from Stanford, proving that a lot of times the money that we spend to get our kids ahead can actually be the obstacles getting in the way of our goals as parents.
Who did you write this book for? Did you write this book for parents?
Oh yeah, the book is for parents. The book is for me. The book can be for almost anyone who spends money on organics, on natural medicine, on higher education, anyone, but really the book is for parents.
Now we'll get right into our questions. How could we not buy it, which is really the title of the book? We're in this economy, in this world where we order it, we get it tomorrow. How could we not buy it?
See, the thing is that nobody's telling you not to buy it. Everyone is only telling you what they're selling, and they're telling you why you need it, and why you should own it, and why you should part with your money. No one is giving you the downside, and that's in my book. Nobody has the information, nobody has all the information, right? Because every company is in the market of making money. They're all for-profit companies, aren't they? So no one's going to tell you why you don't need something. And in my book, I don't give any actual advice. I found the experts who've looked into what we're buying and are saying you don't need it. The educational toy industry, billions of dollars. There are no rules and there are no guidelines for stamping the word educational on a toy box. Anyone can do it. Pediatricians want to see our kids playing. They don't want to see them, sitting there playing with toys that are blinking and telling them letters. They want to see our kids making up games, making up rules. They want to see them failing. They say fosters creativity. It improves social function, which we know also improves the brain. It burns calories. Making up, like playing in the park with absolutely nothing, improves cognitive development. Whereas a lot of these toys with blinking lights, they actually They are responsible for language delays often, sometimes sleep disturbances. They teach instant gratification. So no one's going to tell you, who's going to tell you
Wow, that's amazing.
in the toy store not to buy it? They're just going to say what toy to buy.
Wow, that's amazing when you think about, so it actually delays development and speaking?
Yeah, well, first of all, our kids are not supposed to look at screens until they're 2 years old. Babies do not have the cognitive ability to learn concepts by watching them on a screen. They learn with their 5 senses, which is why they're always putting things in their mouths. It's why they're touching things. And what researchers found was that children and parents speak 85% less when there's a screen on. So now, Vanessa, let me tell you, other researchers separately found that there is a difference between rich kids and poor kids when it comes to their verbal development. The rich kids don't have any more toys than the poor kids. They don't take any more classes. What they found is that the parents, professional parents, speak to their kids more positively and more favorably than parents on welfare. That's it. They just talk to their kids more. And so much so that by the time the kids are 3 years old, there was, in this study, a 30 million word gap between the rich kids and the poor kids. The rich kids altogether knew 30 million more words. And they did follow-up studies. And by 3rd grade, the rich kids were scoring better in vocabulary and reading. Yes, the rich kids started ahead, and they stayed ahead. But why? It's because their parents spoke to them, which is free. Wow. And these are professional parents, so they were working.
Speaking of, what about materialism? Are we raising materialistic kids?
So yes, I mean, you can't not notice it, right? And materialism is a problem. Materialism is a coping strategy that we use to deal with unmet emotional needs. So if you're insecure, a status item with a brand name is a great way to tell the world that you're valuable. It's very easy, right? And materialistic people are also the least satisfied in life. They have greater instances of drug use, of alcoholism, and they're more anxious. So it's you don't want to raise materialistic kids, and there are easy ways to do that. Researchers found that kids who felt loved and kids who felt supported were less materialistic. Okay, so really you have to just listen to them, and it doesn't mean not buying them nice things, right? We live in we live in America. We live in a commercialized society. They deserve holiday gifts. You can't even. You can't even navigate a civilized society without having a dress for a special occasion, right? Or a suit for, wherever you're going, church, whatever it is. So our kids need materialistic things, but we have to balance that with supporting them. Kids who felt autonomous and could make their own decisions were less likely to be materialistic. You can have a lot of nice things and not be materialistic, and you can have very few nice things and be highly materialistic, right? So it's not about how much we give them. One thing that researchers found is that a lot of us are making our kids materialistic by accident. And one way we do that is by rewarding them for a job well done. What happens when we do that is that the children wind up putting the emphasis on the compensation as opposed to the job well done. And then they start associating doing things not for achieving their own goals, but for what they'll get in return. The problem with that is that psychologists know that our intrinsic goals, meeting our intrinsic goals, which are those that come from within us, make us happier than having retail goods. And those, like most of our status items, or all of our status items actually, depend on the approval of other people. Those are called external goals. And you cannot enjoy that Chanel bag, right, in your house. You have to parade it around, right? The kids are the same way. You can't enjoy it by yourself. So it requires the approval of other people, and when we need that kind of approval, we're less happy. We're happier when it comes from within.
Wow. One of the biggest expenses for parents is education. What should parents, or when should they start saving for college?
Okay, so we're supposed to start saving for our kids' college education the very second they're born. If you don't have a plan on the way home from the hospital, that's what you have to do pretty quickly. And the longer you have to save money, the easier it is, right? And also there's something called compounding interest. So, you know, your money earns interest, which earns interest, which earns interest, and you can save less and little bits, and it's much less painful. Let me tell you, 18 years flies. So by the year 2033, I think 4 years of college education, to quote my own book, is going to be $120,000 for, I think, an out-of-state private school. I think, and I think that's a year. Yeah. So that's a lot of money. Ivy League is going to be $250,000, and of course, all of our kids are geniuses. And you don't want your kids to, well, you don't want them to not go to the college that they want to, because you know you don't want to pick your college based on how much money they're going to give you, if you're even going to get any. You know, like people have very, very high expectations of scholarships and grants, and they're just not realistic. Scholarships are really hard to get. And loans are heavy. They're a heavy burden. You have to repay them immediately. And of course, most kids will need loans, and that's okay. But if you can limit how much they take, the child has more mobility. They can choose the job that they want to take, not the one that's going to repay their loans. And also, kids with student debt have delayed life events. They buy homes later, they buy cars later, they have kids later. And it's because they're straddled with the debt.
What about private schools? Many parents feel that is really their only option.
Right. Well, what happened in our country is we've noticed that children from private schools have higher test scores than kids from public schools. That's true. Okay. So we decided as a country that would be, we called it the private school effect. And policy followed suit. We started giving grants to kids in underserved areas so that they could go to private school. We all, as a nation, we decided that private school was better than public school because of these test scores. But then something happened. Two researchers were looking into how to better teach math. They were math researchers, and they too believed in the private school effect. And what they noticed when they were running their regressions is that when you separated everything, when you took two almost identical kids, like let's say two middle-class Hispanic kids in an urban, medium-sized school district, the public school kid would outperform the private school kid. When you took two upper-class African-American kids in smaller, rural school districts, the public school kid would outperform the private school. Like when you compared apples to apples, when you compared child to child, with the identical socioeconomic circumstances, the public school child was outperforming the private school child.
Oh, that's interesting.
The only time that wasn't true was in severely, severely disadvantaged areas, in which case the private school child would outperform the public school child. These researchers found that the overall test scores of the private schools were higher because the private schools could choose who they wanted to admit. And they would choose the children who were most likely to succeed academically anyway. It had nothing to do with the schools. They just selected the children who were more, who were likely to make academic advances. The public school kids had a lot of disadvantaged kids that brought even disabled kids that would bring the test scores down. So overall, the public school scores were lower, the private school scores were higher. But then these researchers went on to write a book, and they found all sorts of things. And one of them was that private schools could use their autonomy to embrace these cutting-edge curriculums, but they don't. They use it for marketing. They found that private schools were less likely to send their teachers for professional development courses, and professional development courses are very positively tied to academic success. Now, to say that these findings were disputed is an understatement. Okay, people came out and they criticized the study, they did other studies, and they put on top of it. The only thing that all the researchers agree on is that the biggest predicator of a child's academic success is parent involvement. So basically, what I take from these findings is you're not guaranteed to produce a higher advancing academically successful child by putting them in private school or by public school. If you want to send your kid to private school and you have the money, go ahead. But guess what? If you're doing it because because society tells you that you have to, or if you're doing it because you're afraid that you're the only kid with, you know what I mean? There's no guarantees. So you could be throwing away your money, and you could have stronger, you could more readily meet your goals, or your child could meet his or her goals in public school. You know. And then you have money left over for college, which we just discussed is very expensive.
Perfect, perfect. Now, okay, what about early education? Kindergarten, some kindergartens are more expensive than, you know, some junior colleges, yeah.
And preschool. It's true. So I think that the biggest pitfall in early childhood education is all of the people trying to sell us products to make our kids smarter. So one of the things that researchers found is that kids who play with blocks had better math skills. Puzzles are also very helpful for spatial skills. It's the cheapest toys, researchers found, rubber balls, that really make a kid smarter. A lot of these programs are going to teach our toddlers how to read. How can you argue with that, right? Here's how. When a toddler is reading, no matter how advanced your toddler is, they are going to be reading very short sentences and simple stories. When we read to our children, okay, and that's free, when we read to them, they learn bigger words, their vocabulary expands, there are moral lessons in the stories. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. We can discuss with them later, well, what do you think the character should have done? Because there's more going on in the stories that we can read to them. So, you know, a lot of the pediatricians say, forget the $200 a month, you know, reading lesson. Just read to your kid. They're going to learn how to read. And there's no proof that learning to read earlier has any lasting academic gain.
Do parents overspend?
Every time. Listen, this is the most important job we've ever had. Right? We're responsible for, you know, for raising an entire human being. So we're emotional, we're terrified, it makes us the perfect consumer. We can't help it. We're not bad people, we just care. And everyone is telling us what we need to buy, and no one's telling us that we don't need it.
Let's get back to the infants. Okay. All the gear that's needed for an infant. Right. How could you not overspend?
Because you leave the hospital and they're like, okay, you can take home this baby, but you need a car seat, right? And you're like, well, this is no place to start skimping. I'm going to get the most expensive car seat. Well, let me tell you something. First of all baby gear, cribs, car seats, high chairs, bath seats, they all must meet the exact same federal standards. They all undergo the same inspections. One cannot be safer than the other one. And sometimes the more expensive ones give you a false sense of security. So for example, your car seat. Now a car seat can only perform its life-saving mission if it's properly installed. Okay, and even like a 1-inch difference can like cause a baby to swing wildly in a crash, right? The most expensive car seats have like 15 ways to install them. They're front facing, you can turn them around, they're rear facing, things extend, the seat is more comfortable, you can tilt it back and forth. So it can potentially be more difficult to install, which makes it, I mean, like I said, if it's not installed properly, it could be more dangerous. But really, this could be a pitfall. Another place, baby monitors, right? So you have this baby and you're like, well, I'm going to make sure I know what the baby's doing at all times. So now they have video of baby monitors where you can be out of the house and log in on your smartphone. Several families have found that their baby monitors have been hacked. They're easy to hack. Have you heard that?
Yes.
So couples have been in their kitchen, heard people screaming at obscenities at their baby, and they go in there and found that the camera was panning seamlessly seemingly by itself onto them, and then the guy started screaming at the parents obscenities. And yeah, at this baby. And how dangerous is that someone can see your baby? One news reporter from Channel 7, actually in Miami, drove around a neighborhood, a family neighborhood, with a standard baby monitor receiver, just the receiver, in his van, and drove through and saw baby after baby after baby, just to show you how dangerous these are. You know what? The old-fashioned video monitors that I used or that our parents used, not to call either of us old-fashioned, but it's really, like, unless you're 10 years old right now, you know, if you're over 10 years old, are $13. And it's the audio you really need, right? You need a baby monitor, so if your baby wakes up in the middle of the night, you know. That's the audio. Even if you had a video of it, you're sleeping, so you're not going to be watching it anyway. It's the audio that would tell you.
Amazing. I mean, your stories are practical, and it's almost funny, but sad. I mean, it's scary.
Right.
You know, to see somebody riding through the neighborhoods, and yes, they hack them all the time. It's crazy. It seems the biggest cost to having a kid is housing them.
Yeah.
What about the price of home ownership? Are many over our heads? Are we over our heads in that term?
A lot of us are doing things because we think it's what our family needs, and it is not necessarily what our family needs. So when we talk about buying a home, most of us are going to allot a certain amount of money towards our house no matter what, right? We have a certain amount of a mortgage that we can afford and a down payment that we can make, and that's fine. America has decided, I think, that the more square feet a family has, the happier that family is. And we've all seen it, right? You know, and these big houses with these media rooms with the kids and because a lot of people think that their child needs their own room and needs this giant backyard, they're moving really far away from their jobs, from their families, and whether or not the benefits of living in that big house outweigh the benefits of living close to your job, I mean, that's for everybody to decide. But there's a litany of psychological benefits to living in a smaller home. And I'll just go over those, and then I'll tell you the benefits of living close to your job. First of all, there is no research out there that shows that kids need their own rooms. There is science that does tell us that the frontal lobes of children's brains are not really developed until they're about 7 years old. And that is why they believe in Santa Claus, it's why they believe in the Tooth Fairy, and it's why they really do believe that there are monsters under the bed. And having a sibling in the same room, or having a parent whose room is very close by, offers a security that they can't even verbalize. Well, they don't know about it. Do you know what I mean? They don't realize that they have that security. So they certainly, and if they did, they wouldn't be able to tell you anything. But they don't, it just offers a security that they cannot discuss. Also, sibling relationships are very important to people throughout their lives. It's like, it's somebody who knows your history, and when you live, even if they hate each other, they are like, they love fighting. Most doctors will tell you. They learn to negotiate, they learn to collaborate, they learn to gang up on you. There's pillow talk even with them, like they recount their days in the middle of the night, and it brings them close. Also, family bonding happens most effectively during the unscripted moments. It's not during the times that we all sit down and we you know what I mean, and we're all gonna play a game. It's really just joking around throughout the day when you see each other in the island in the kitchen, or when you're just you pass each other in the hallways and you start talking. Those moments really do count, and they happen more frequently in a smaller home.
How can we be smarter about buying homes?
There are economic indicators that will tell you when the housing market is affordable and when it's overheated. Or if it's just taking off, you can see it. It's so easy. All you have to know is how to count. If you know that 3 is less than 4 and 5 is more than 2, like if you know that, you can read an economic indicator, and I go over it all in my book. It's so simple once you read the steps.
Excellent, excellent advice. What about cultivating talent? How would parent know if their child is a prodigy or not?
Yeah.
And without exposing them to the music, to dancing, singing lessons, those are all very expensive.
Right, it's very expensive. And we as parents, if you have a child who seems to excel at something, sports, drama, singing, as a good parent, you absolutely must cultivate this talent, don't you? And the first thing we do to help our kids develop what is naturally within them is we hire a private coach. And in doing that, we're sort of raising tiny little narcissists. We talk about the child's great talent in front of the coach. The coach is always going to agree, by the way, because you're paying the coach, right? Yes, of course this child is talented and needs the skills that I can teach them. And a lot, what happens is, and it's fine, it's great. There's a few things that you have to know. First of all, someone's always going to come on with natural talent without any coaching and could outperform your child in any way, right? In sports, drama, anything. And a lot of these kids, like Whitney Houston, learned how to sing in church. A lot of these kids learn how to sing at religious organizations, right? So I'm one of the parents that has a child who sings, so I pay a lot of money for singing lessons. And I know for sure, after writing this book, I know for sure, listen, if you want the singing lessons, get the singing lessons. But these are not guaranteeing anything. Someone can come in without any formal training and sing my kid right off the stage. If, you know, that could happen. And I take my singing lessons, I spend my money on singing lessons knowing that. We don't do them every week now. We might do them every other, and then we spend the other time practicing, because it's practice that makes perfect, isn't it? It's not lessons. So I go into schools and different organizations, and I was in a town in Massachusetts, and they're like, listen, the Harvard lacrosse team, right? What if your kid doesn't, like, these parents are serious, right? They're talking about the Harvard lacrosse team. And I was like, wow, Harvard has a lacrosse team. My daughter actually plays lacrosse. I was so interested to hear that. And they said, how do you teach your child the discipline? How do you teach your child willpower if you don't have them enrolled in some sort of discipline? And like, you know, dance, or, you know, where they have to go every week and they have to practice every. So it turns out the only thing that leads to a child's success is willpower and self-control. What they were telling me is self-confidence. What the researcher told me is self-confidence does not lead to success at all. It's the other way around. If you succeed in something, you will feel confident. But having confidence doesn't help you achieve your goals. So, like I said, it's hard work and self-control. So willpower, which is self-control, that is really the key to us achieving anything in life, right? I mean, you can be really talented, but if you don't put the work in, you're not going to do it, right? You're not going to get to where you need to be. So willpower is like a muscle, in that you can build your willpower up over time, and you can deplete it throughout the day. But the way you build it up, especially in children, are cheap and is free. So what you do is you use, you focus at a time you normally wouldn't focus during the day. So you have your kids sit up straight all the time, or you have them eliminate contractions. I have 2 preteen girls, so my favorite is eliminate the use of the word like. You have them make their beds every day, brush their teeth with their other hand. And what they've found, what science has found, is when you improve your willpower in one area, it spills over to all aspects of your life. So yes, we have to teach our kids discipline, of course, but do we have to do it by spending $150 an hour, you know what I mean, or, you know, thousands of dollars on dance shoes and traveling soccer, you know, probably not. Now we can do those things if we want to, but they don't. You can spend every single dime you're supposed to spend, and you're not guaranteed success. You're not guaranteed the scholarship. In fact, only 5% of varsity high school players will play in college. 5%, and only a sliver of those will get scholarships.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of money being spent.
And made by the people who are selling these videos to showcase your child's, you know, to send them to college, to recruiters. There's a lot of money to be made in these traveling teams, in the lessons, and the drum, and the costumes. You know, and like I said, I'm in it. You know, I have 2 girls, and one sings, and I see it.
You just want parents to be aware of what they're doing.
I know, yeah, and of what they're guaranteed to get, which is absolutely nothing. So if you want to buy the singing lessons, go ahead. But just know, if you don't, the kid who is buying them, who might seem like they're getting ahead, I mean, you can't compete with that kid, because then someone else could come in. You know what I mean? You just don't know. If you're enjoying it and you can afford it, and your kid is enjoying it, that's fine. If you're doing it so your child doesn't fall behind because other kids are doing it, forget it. If you're doing it to be part of a competition, you're not guaranteed to win.
We talked about the lessons, we talked about housing. Now let's talk about feeding our children.
Okay.
And one of the things, you mentioned it earlier, organic food.
Right.
As a home economist, where do you see that falling into maybe us spending too much money?
Okay, so organic food costs a lot more. What you have to know about organic food is that it's not made without pesticides. It's made without synthetic pesticides, which sounds perfectly reasonable until you realize that natural pesticides are still toxic. They're still designed to kill bugs. There are no regulations for how frequently they can be sprayed. There are regulations for how frequently you can spray synthetic pesticides. So that means that, well, you have to think about it. Do you want something in a small dose? You know, like almost anything can be safe in small doses. Almost anything can be toxic in large doses. What's more is the EPA understands that conventional farms and organic farms share land. So what they say is, okay. If the synthetic pesticide blow over and sort of rest on the organic pesticide, that's okay, assuming it's at levels of 5% of what we consider safe. So then the EPA went out and tested its own program. They tested a whole array of vegetables and fruits. And they found that 50% of these had no synthetic pesticides. They found that about 30%, more or less, 30% had above the levels of 5%, and 20% were at the 5% level. So basically, when you buy, according to the study, when you buy organic produce, you only have a 50% chance of not getting any synthetic pesticides, right? And then Cornell University went out and they did a study and they found that the variation in synthetic pesticide residue among organic groceries was as big as the difference between the variation between organic and conventional.
That's because they're planted in close proximity to the other.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. Also, organic produce is fertilized with manure, and if it's from cows that have antibiotics, then that gets into the soil, which gets in. You know what I mean? So there's all sorts of factors, and it's okay. Like I said, it's okay to buy organic. What's not okay is to accept dirty looks in the supermarket from another mother who's buying organics and is getting and only has a 50% chance that her money is being well spent. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's okay. I'm not saying don't buy organics, it's always a ripoff. No, there's a variation and there might be some benefits and there might not. But we can't, as parents, feel like we're subpar at our jobs for buying conventional produce. We can't, as parents, feel superior to other parents because we're buying organic produce. I'm saying there is a variation in this industry that is very great.
Wow. Another expense, natural medicine. Kids pass around germs all the time. What about spending money on herbs, extra vitamins, those kind of things to keep our kids not having to take those horrible antibiotics?
Right. Well, what's important to remember is that natural medicine is regulated as a supplement, which means it's not at all regulated. It's not regulated for safety. It's not regulated for effectiveness. It's impossible to imagine what it's being regulated for, if not for being safe or effective. But that's what you have to remember. They don't even check that what's in the bottle is the same as what's on the label. The American Academy of Pediatrics came out and they found that honey can soothe a child's cough, okay? And it can help kids sleep better, parents sleep better, and kids over 12 months old. So now you see every cough syrup saying it has honey in it. Guess what? You can just buy the honey. The thing about natural medicine is it's supposed to be made by nature. As soon as a corporation gets its hands on it and mixes it with 17 different ingredients, now it's not natural, now it's processed.
Finally, talk about estate planning.
And one thing about my book is that after every chapter, I discuss the tried and true ways that that financial experts want to see. I discuss where we can put it so it actually will launch our kids into greatness. But really the one thing that can guarantee our mortality is estate planning, because in your will, you really can put down what you want for your child forever. You can pick the guardians if you're not around. You can pick one person to raise your kids, one person to be in charge of your money. This is a legal document that guarantees your wishes right now will be carried out forever if, you know, hopefully we'll all be around. But one way to ensure that you can pass on what you want for your kids for always is to have all these decisions made.
Is there anything else in the book that you wanted to cover?
I mean, we covered so much. I think that and the book is so thick with research and with information. It's almost better to, like in many cases, to just go through it. And my goal in writing this book was to say, yes, if you want something, go ahead and buy it. But if you're sitting around a table with a whole group of parents that are telling you what you absolutely have to have or your kid will fall behind, or they're telling you the class you must take because that happens. I want you to buy things because you want them, not because you're terrified not to have them. I want everyone to be able to participate in this conversation of what you have to, over what everyone is saying you have to have it, and you to say, I'm not buying it. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm not buying it.
Brett Graff, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for your tips.
A pleasure to be here.
I'm Vanessa Tyler, and join us next time on Sartor TV, where creative thinkers come to share their ideas.